Hello everyone, welcome to TFT-11 for T21 aspirants. We are doing topic 3, research methods and analysis, and we have covered the first subtopic, which is qualitative and quantitative methods. We have also done a portion of subtopic B, techniques of data collection, the primary sources. We have done few methods, and today we will be doing the rest of the methods. Let's recap. The primary sources, we studied about sampling. In sampling, there were different types, for example, random sampling, stratified sampling, quota sampling, multi-stage, snowballing, non-representative. The primary sources, the other methods were case studies, life histories, pilot studies, social surveys and questionnaires. You studied about the pros and cons of each method and how the positivists as well as the interpretivists, they approach these methods. Today you will be doing interviews, observation and longitudinal research, that is the remaining topics of the primary sources. Let's understand what is the difference between quantitative and qualitative methods. Although it has been done before, still let's look at it. A quantitative method follows a particular type of reasoning, that is deduction, objectivity and causation. In a qualitative method, it follows the induction method, subjectivity and there is interpretation of meaning. The type of question in quantitative method is pre-specified, pre-decided, whereas it is open-ended in the case of qualitative method. Also, the type of question is outcome-oriented. That means the answer that is given by the respondent is given more importance. But here in the qualitative method, the process, that means the interpretation which is involved while coming at the response, is given more importance. Similarly, in the type of analysis, in quantitative method, researcher goes for numerical estimation and statistical inference. But in the qualitative method, narrative description is given importance and there is constant comparison. So, you need to remember all these points. You should understand that no method is completely qualitative or quantitative. We will see today how the same method can be used differently by positivists as well as interpretivists. The first method that we are going to study is interviews. Interviews, there are different types. The first one is structured interviews. These are questionnaires which are administered by the researcher. These are under the supervision of a researcher and therefore they are structured. They follow a particular direction. The second type is unstructured interviews. They do not have preset questions and are more like a conversation, flows. In a partly structured interview, most interviews are partly structured with some preset questions, or the researcher has a list of topics to cover. Some interviews allow prompts where interviewers can clarify questions or stimulate responses. Most interviews are non-directive. They try to avoid influencing the interview in order to increase the objectivity of the research. The fifth type is aggressive interview. Here it is useful for some topics, for example, hidden feelings, hidden racist feelings, which may not be revealed in a structured, unstructured or any other interview. But in the course of a confrontation, these hidden feelings come out. This method was proposed by or advocated by Becker. Next comes group interviews. Group interviews are sometimes used to put respondents at ease or to make respondents more reflective, because they introspect along with kind of brainstorming along with other respondents. They are more likely to open up as a result of this interaction between the interviewers. A major type of focus of group interview is focus group discussion or focus group interview. It is a type of group interview most often used by political parties. Here, according to Bryman, they emphasize the joint construction of meaning because they are doing it in a group. So, how does a group construct meaning? and in a focus group this can lead to a great probing of why people do things, and this is studied by the researcher because he or she can observe people, observe a person in a group, and it helps him to study group behavior. They are therefore favored by interactionists because they emphasize on the interaction part rather than one-to-one interviews. However, there is a disadvantage that the answers given may be influenced by the most prominent members, and therefore they are sometimes not effective because a respondent does not give his or her original answer but is influenced by the prominent answer and changes his or her answer. What are the advantages of interviews? Here, the quantitative researchers, they prefer interviews to other method like participant observation because larger samples can be taken. At one time, a larger group can be interviewed. Here, statistical data can be produced with the coding of questions. If the questions are pre-decided, then it is easier for a quantitative researcher to come up with a conclusion. And also, by distributing the same set of questions, replication is possible and hence the reliability of the method increases. Similarly, even the qualitative researchers prefer interviews to questionnaires because concepts can be clarified by asking there and then. And here, the subjects or the respondents can express their opinions and their attitudes too. And here it is important because the respondents can explore issues in depth and they can express themselves in descriptive manner. Here one point to be noted is that interviews may not be the ideal method for positivists or interviews, but they are useful to both. Hence, one particular method can be used differently by positivists as well as interpretivists. Therefore, any method cannot said to be totally qualitative or totally quantitative. It can be used by both the sections of researchers. However, there are certain disadvantages, and the first one is about validity. If the respondent chooses to be untruthful during the interview, he does not remember the past events clearly or does not fully understand the question, then the method or the interview will not be valid. Similarly, there is an interview bias because since the researcher is present while taking the interview, therefore he or she may influence the answers. Why? Because the interviewer might consciously or unconsciously lead respondents towards preferred answers by either prompting, by either supporting, or by discouraging. The interviewer might lead the respondents toward a preferred answer. Another factor is social factor, which is the ethnicity, because people belonging to different ethnicity, different social background, different social group, they may answer the same question differently. Despite so many imperfections, an interview is quite practical and flexible because it can be used to record statistics as well as opinions, even by different theoretical perspectives. Hence, it is an ideal choice for interviewers of either group. Next method is observation. According to positivists, observations are essential. You remember empiricism. Anything which is observed should be studied according to the positivists. So, observation is an important part of sociological research, and according to interpretivists, they are in favor of participant observation. They prefer this part of observation. What happens in a participant observation? Here the researcher becomes a part of the social life that he is studying. Suppose this is a researcher and this is the part or the village which he or she is supposed to study, then the researcher will become a part. Researcher will come here, reside with the people of the village, he will study, he will observe, and he will come up with a data and conclusion. So he becomes a part of the social life that he or she is studying. Participant observation is quite useful in ethnography. Ethnography is the study of the way of life, and here it is important because there are many factors which are to be studied. Lifestyle means their religious life, their political life, their family life, their economic life. There are many factors to be studied, many variables to be studied, and therefore it requires a longer period of time where the researcher will have to go to that village or to that sample area to study all these variables. There are two types of participant observation. First one is overt and second one is covert. Overt means an open type of participant observation. Here the researcher tells them, the people, that he or she is conducting the research, and so he can ask questions, and there is a certain detachment because the people will not mix easily. They know that this person is a researcher, they will keep a distance, so the researcher is able to perform freely and in a detached manner. But the problem here is that since the respondents know that they are under study, they will be influenced, their behavior will be influenced, and the researcher might not be able to capture the actual behavior. What happens in a covert participant observation? Here the researcher does not reveal that he or she is conducting the research, so he goes and starts studying, observing, and he finds people in their natural setting, natural ecology, and he can access each and everything which might not be accessible if he told them that he was doing the research. So the researcher can get an insider's perspective, but the negative point is that this is unethical, and also he or she may become too involved with the people, may mix too easily, may become a part of them, and he or she may lose objectivity. The advantages of participant observation are that the researchers, they don't impose their own concepts. They simply have to observe whatever is there, their lifestyle, and jot down their observations. Here another good point is that during observation sometimes they might find answers to those questions which they had not expected. So some new revelations might happen there. Also here the respondents can't lie, the people under observation can't lie, because it is their lifestyle which is being observed, how they are living, their financial condition, their social conditions, and these things cannot be changed in a moment. Therefore there is a high degree of validity because the picture of the social reality is very closer to what it is being done. This type of method is preferred by symbolic interactionists because here the dynamic picture is before them. There is no static part because it is measuring the living style of people, which is dynamic, and it includes the living part, which is social process, social change of the people. Here the researcher also develops empathy, because once the researcher is in their position, he or she tries to put himself in their shoes, and he is in a better position to understand the viewpoint of the people, their opinions, their meanings, and it helps him in in-depth studies of social life. So participant observation has many advantages, and it is quite helpful for the symbolic interactionists. There are many disadvantages also. One point is that it is time consuming and expensive, because you cannot come to conclusion within in a one day or 1 week. At least 1 month you may have to stay there in that village. It is expensive because cost of living, other expenses, eating, accommodation, everything. Another point is that use of cameras or tape recorders may not be possible. So a researcher has to rely on field notes. He or she may forget certain things. He or she may be very selective and note down only a few points and leave out certain important points. Next point is that studies cannot be replicated. This is a very much disadvantageous point because it makes it unreliable. So while in advantages you can see that PO, participant observation, has a high degree of validity, it is unreliable. On a reliability point, validity it has a checkpoint, reliability it has a cross, cannot be reliable. And also there are many subjective interpretations. For example, one researcher may interpret the lifestyle or the social life in one particular dimension. He can see 4 or 5 dimensions, and the other researcher will perhaps see another set of differences, another set of meanings, social reality. So there is a lot of subjectivity involved in this method. It entirely depends on the researcher to come up with a reliable document, and this is a very important point which we should think of. Another point is that there is a change in group behavior. So what happens here? Because here what happens, that the researcher is there asking questions to people, and since people may or may not know that this person is asking questions, but there will be a change in group behavior. If someone asks you questions from once, twice, thrice, then you will suddenly become very evasive. First few times you are going to answer the questions, but later on you will be reluctant to answer questions. So the behavior of the people might also change. They may try to avoid. So this will affect the validity of the research. And because the researcher is living there, he or she, perhaps they may have got involved in the lifestyle, they may lose objectivity. And because of these disadvantages, the positivists, they are not at all in favor of participant observations, and they call it unsystematic, subjective and unscientific. The last point or the last research method is longitudinal research. It is same as participant observation, and here what happens, it follows a longitudinal approach, follows a group of people over an extended period using periodic data collection. That means periodically the data is collected. Let's say on a weekly basis, certain variables are pre-decided that I am going to study these 5-6 variables, and like an experiment, week 1, week 2, week 3, all these 5-6 variables will be jotted down. Okay, this is the value, this is the value, this is the value, this is the value, like that. So we have so many, maybe 2 or 3 months data. We have a lot of data to come up with a proper theory. So this is very helpful, and it can be termed as a large scale quantitative studies. A participant observation can also be longitudinal. If I stay there for 2-3 months and I jot down all these factors on a regular basis, then it becomes a longitudinal research. The advantage of longitudinal research is that there is no problem of faulty memory or reinterpretation. Why? Because periodically this data is being collected, so the respondent does not have to remember what happened in week 1 or what happened in week 2, because that data I as a researcher I have already collected. So I am only interested in perhaps week 4. I will not ask here about week 1. Or a reinterpretation, because I have this week 1 data has been noted down and the interpretation has also been done. So there is no need to do it in another week. Here, the advantage of LR is that it can examine a large number of variables. I can choose 10 variables about that village, and then week 1 I will note down my observations, all the 10 variables I will note down. Similarly, week 2, week 3, like that I can do it on a periodic basis. So this is the advantage of longitudinal method. But it also has certain disadvantages. Why? Because the size of the participating sample may drop. Let's say I am observing 50 people in week 1, then maybe in week 4 there are only 25 people who are willing to be interviewed. Then it adversely affects my research because the reliability is decreasing. Why? Because in order to replicate, in order to reproduce the same research, I need to have the same number of people whom am I observing. And if it started with 50 and now it is 25, then reliability reduces. Also, there are limitations of the method which I am being used. I can use any sort of method. Maybe I am giving them a questionnaire, or I am conducting a survey, or any kind of method, but that method will also have certain limitations which will add on to that longitudinal research. The third point is the subject's behavior might change, because usually what happens, whenever a human being is under study, that person's behavior does not remain same. This point has to be noted, should be on your fingertips. That is the problem that we as sociologists or we as social researchers face while studying human beings, because their behavior does not remain constant. And this point will come up in every method, and it affects this longitudinal research method also. So these are the methods that we studied for primary sources, and we are doing it from the methodology chapter of Haralambous and Holborn, which is the blue book. The orange book has very less of the methods and it does not include all the methods, therefore please do not read it, read the blue book. And regarding Nitin Sangwan, I would suggest that you go through this book after completing the secondary sources from Haralambous and Holborn. Do it in the last phase of your preparation of this topic, just glance through it. Right? So the next topic will be secondary sources. All the best, happy learning, enjoy and take care.